New day scouting today. I'm heading up to a thermal hub that I identified on a map. It's actually right above a massive active signpost. So I want to get up here on limited daylight and really just do a quick swoop through the bottom of the thermal hub and see if it would make sense for me to haul out here during archery season and set up in my saddle. So Goose and I are making our way up this trail, and we'll get off the trail in a few miles, dip into the bottom of the thermal hub and see if there's anything good up there. We're about halfway up right now, and I think just the goal today is to identify some sort of community scrape and get a camera on it. I have 2 cameras in my backpack. We know that bucks love these thermal hubs because it sort of gives them protection from all different angles as the thermals drop and rise in the mountain range. So ideally, I'll get out there, sort of work the bottom of the hub where steep terrain meets flat terrain, and I'll just see if anything's working it. Now, obviously it's not a foolproof strategy. Like, you have to go out to the places you identify on a map and see if they're actually good. So I'm just getting off the trail, and you know, my initial thoughts on this ridge so far are that it's going to be really good for when the beech trees start dropping their beech nuts. If you look around me, there's nothing but skinny and old beech trees. So I think early season, this is going to be a really good spot. You know, it potentially is holding deer in here already. I have seen some tracks. I haven't seen any significant runs, but this is sort of a secondary ridge on the other side of the mountain that I've got a bunch of core family groups of does hanging out, and in that area where the does are, it looks like the bucks had rutted pretty hard last year. Really what I'm looking for, beech trees that have sort of a blend of like pine trees, and these like thickets that are sort of like little pods in the mix. And then if you look at the terrain, there's all sorts of fingers that sort of lead down to the bottom of the ridge where I found a few active signposts. So I think that's great. And then if you look at winter imagery, it kind of discourages you because it's like, wow, this is pretty open. Like, I don't know if the bucks are gonna be hanging out in an open hardwood ridge like this. But if you look at these little beech whips, right? You've got all these skinny young beech trees. They actually hold their leaves, in my experience, until, you know, January or even later, until the new leaves actually push the old leaves off the branches. So I'm theorizing that with all these fingers, the feed, the water, and then these skinny beech whips that actually do provide cover, this might be a really nice ridge to set up, find a nice finger that does have some sort of travel or some historic buck sign, and then just set up for an evening sit and move throughout these ridges. As I make my way through these woods, I'm not really noticing a lot of doe sign, deer sign, I guess, in general, but my problem's been I can't stop finding does. And early season, you're not gonna really find like these big mature bucks hanging around a lot of does. They're gonna be grouped up with smaller bucks or even bucks their same size in these more remote areas that are quiet and unbothered. And so, because I'm not finding a ton of deer sign in here, I'm actually optimistic that there's a possible hub in here for deer to just sort of hang out, be by themselves. I'm trying to shoot big deer, so these are the areas that I'm going to focus on early archery season. Now, once we get towards October and we get towards the rut, I am absolutely not focusing on areas like this. I'm going to use historical information that I've gathered where I've gotten bucks on picture or on camera, what time of the year I've gotten them on camera, and if it's during the rut. More often than not, I'm getting pictures around signposts, like active signposts, not signposts that have been, you know, used and abandoned. I'm talking like ripped up every year, in a super isolated area. There's strategic terrain for the deer, and that's where I'm going to shift my focus to, you know, after the leaves have started to drop, and obviously testosterone levels are going up for these bucks. But, you know, in here it's just kind of, it's open, but it's not. You really aren't getting a shot past 30 yards. There's some super tight sections if you look over here. All super tight, high stem type terrain. So I'm not seeing a lot of stuff right now in terms of sign, but I'm going to continue sort of meandering through this tight area to see if I can find a run. And I imagine once I get closer to this brook, that's where I'm going to start running into better sign. So I'm coming up on an old clear cut, and I like to go check these, but I don't really walk in the middle. I just walk the edge. What I've noticed is bucks will rub the outside edge. I don't know if they're sort of going to the edge and just barely dipping into the clear cut, and the wind swirling, they're just getting a smell for what's in the area or what. But usually if you find a sort of open area in the woods, it does make sense to get up along the side of these edges and sort of just work the side. And of course, as you look down, you've already got deer tracks sort of working alongside this clear cut. So this is a perfect example of a transition line. You've got super open area, more closed off timber in here, which is still open hardwoods. And then ideally, once we get over here to where the terrain starts getting thicker, we'll have some tight conifers, and that's where I imagine they're going to be bedding. So I'm gonna sort of make my way through this thick area, see if there's sign that bucks are hanging out in here. You know, looking for old rubs and new rubs that show that they've been in here in the last 3 years, 2-3 years, even last year. And then once I get out of this thick stuff, I'm gonna walk the line, that transition line, from the super thick stuff to the hardwoods, and see if there aren't any scrapes that are sort of communicating, you know, hey, I'm in here. I'm looking for a community scrape. They're hard to find, but they are in here. So I'm emerging from that thicket, right? All thicket, softwood, beech, tight beech. You can see the line along my finger. And then if you look out here, it gets super open into hardwoods again. So really, my thoughts are, I'm gonna walk this line. I'm already seeing doe tracks that are literally going straight up this edge. I'm gonna walk this line and then circle around, because I'm starting to see some more ravines, and there's another super thick section of woods up there. I'm just gonna see if anything is active in here. Right now I'm not seeing any buck sign, and you know, you're not really reinventing the wheel. It's not rocket science. If there's no buck sign, then it's, you know, it's kind of hard to argue that they're here year round. And that's what I need right now, because I'm looking for a buck to kill during archery season. Now, you know, if we start getting through here and there's a lot of like historical sort of rubs and scrapes, and you can tell that this place is just getting ripped up during the rut, yeah, I'm going to come back during rifle season. So I'm sort of hunting for whatever weapon I'm using. Bow, I'm looking for their home range. Rifle, I'm looking for their rut range, which for some bucks it might be the same range every year, the same ridge every year. And it's even been found that older bucks will actually anticipate the rut, and they'll move into an area early. So the reason I say that, it's like, you know, if you have limited time to get out here and look for deer, you can get cameras and put them out here in some areas that you found some serious rut sign, and just leave them there all year. Come back after the season and see if anything showed up. And if anything does show up, you can use that information and sort of hypothesize or guess that the buck's likely going to be back within that same 3 to 4 day window the following rut. A lot of guys are doing that right now. They're seeing success. So for people that don't have enough time to do what I'm doing right now, you know, that's really how you get your best bang for your buck. So this section of woods right here is perfect browse for deer and moose. We just came out of that super thick thicket, just over, I don't know, 50 yards. And if you look behind me, it's all just low shrubs that have a bunch of trees that have buds on it. I mean, if you look up at any of these branches, you can see that deer, moose have been browsing all throughout here. So, you know, I don't have a lot of buck sign in here, but it does make sense to get a camera, just I guess facing the super open area, see if I can catch anything in here. Before I do that, there is another clearing right behind me, straight ahead. That clearing, I don't know, looks like it's about an acre. I'm gonna do a circle around that, and if I have buck sign right up here, I'll probably put a camera just on the inside of the clear cut, but facing towards the woods. I'm starting to get into a section of woods that just has shelf, gradual shelf, gradual shelf, gradual shelf. So, like if you look behind me, goes up, there's another shelf. To the left, goes down a little bit, and there's another shelf. Typically, this is where I'm going to find nice scrapes that have sort of more, I don't know, deer activity throughout the year. And if I'm going to bet any money, if I'm going to find any type of community scrape, it's going to be on this shelf. It's just above a super steep incline to my left. There's a lot of wind that's sort of coming up. And then there's also a steep section of woods to my right with all sorts of just beautiful browse for the deer in here. So I'm praying that there's some sort of community scrape in here. If there isn't, I'm going to make one. I cut out of that hardwood and I dropped down the ridge because I'm starting to get to a point where I had marked. I'm thinking that that point's going to be where I end up hanging my saddle. But it ended up dropping me into this super thick swamp. Like it's brutal to walk in. It doesn't look that thick, but if I show you over here, it's just this stupid thick shit. This trail right here is what I had just found. So I can't tell if it's moose or deer, but to me it looks like this is a main travel corridor, and we're about to drop into the point that I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, where I thought that the thermal hub was going to be advantageous for those deer. And as I look at the ground, I mean, it looks like deer are browsing in here. There's some deer droppings right here. I mean, this is the kind of spot that I'm tempted to drop a camera, because most hunters aren't going to want to walk in here. So when the woods are getting pressured pretty heavily, this is a place of refuge for the deer. And you really never know. I mean, last time I got a giant buck on film with one of my game cameras, it was exactly in a spot like this. So I guarantee we walk through here too, and we end up finding some beds. This high grass completely covers their body and really just gives them pretty opportune hiding areas. Definitely not walking through that swamp today. It's way too deep. But I'm still sort of on the edge of it. It's really thick. It's got some runs in here that I haven't been able to find yet, so I don't know, I'm pretty optimistic. I think on the bottom of this swamp, we're gonna have some pretty optimal areas for community scrapes. Just as I had thought, there's a rub, an old rub, just on that lower section of this swamp. I wish I had my binos because it looks like there might be a deer down over there. So I'm just gonna keep walking this line. It looks like there's a run. We've got that old rub right there, so we've got some historical rubs. We just got to see more sign to put a camera down. It's just super thick in there, super swampy. Some of the biggest deer that you run into are always in shit like that. Running out of daylight though, so I gotta find something quick here if I'm gonna put a camera down. So the woods are starting to get a little dark. We're not really finding the sign that we were hoping to find, but I also ran out of time. So there's a whole bowl over here to the right that I'm really hoping to check out at some point. But, you know, another, I guess, final thought for this video. You can check these clearings, and what you'll end up finding are all these animal trails, because what they do is they walk through here and they browse on all this vegetation. You know, here's a little run too. So you can see they're coming right through here. They're going that way, cutting all through here. So, you know, last resort, if you're not really finding sign, I've had a lot of success in putting a camera, you know, sort of on a tree on the edge that sort of faces in an area where you know they're walking back and forth because of the trails and the grass. And this year I've got 2 8 points that just sort of popped up and just happened to be using the forest for the vegetation that's right there. So I didn't have a ton of buck sign, but I put a camera there just sort of on a hunch, and it ended up working out. But I'm gonna have to get back out later this week to start checking this bowl, because this bowl is ultimately where I think I need to be come archery season. I've got like 4 or 5 different spots that I'm checking out that I feel pretty good about. Realistically, 2 of the spots are gonna be, I think, where I end up killing my buck this year. So until then, I'm just, you know, any bit of free time that I get, I'm out in the woods. I'm sort of checking my maps before I get out there, e-scouting on X. I'm looking for thermal hubs where sort of all the thermals are sucking down into a specific area in the woods. And I'm getting out there and I'm seeing if it makes sense to try to hunt bucks. Until then, you know, if I have an hour, I'll get in the woods and I'll really just work alongside the road. I'll see if any big bucks are hanging out in there, because typically those areas are fairly unpressured and overlooked, if that makes sense. And then if I have a little bit more time, I'll use those days to get farther out in the woods, deeper thermal hubs, looking for side hill runs, etc. So we're gonna get out of here before it gets too dark. Just make our way down this old log cut. Not the most successful scouting trip, but we know where to start once I get out here again. There's just a lot of woods on this ridge, and I'm sort of learning with everybody because it's a new area. We recently moved this year, and I guess I'm starting over. I haven't hunted up here ever. So I'm excited to see what's in store for this hunting season. I think there's a lot to offer in this particular area. And I know that most of the deer sign is down low, almost closer to the road. I killed my biggest buck within 100 yards of the truck. So now that I've gone up top and I'm not really seeing what I want to see, next time when I come out here, I'm going to sort of parallel the road and sort of zigzag up to see if I can find better buck sign.